as a dedicated mountain climber. This individual endeavors to rescue stranded men from the summit. However, the climber soon discovers that these seemingly helpless individuals are, in fact, ruthless robbers on a quest for a staggering $100 million in cash. Facing both criminal adversaries and the unforgiving elements of the mountain, this intense thriller presents a gripping challenge that unfolds at breathtaking heights. Hello, welcome back to Movies. Today, we're looking into the 1993 American action thriller film called Cliffhanger. But before we jump into the details, make sure to show us some love by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Now, let's get right into it. The movie begins when a mountain ranger named Gabriel Walker, also known as Gabe, alongside his pilot girlfriend Jessie Deegan, and a ranger named Frank goes to rescue their fellow ranger friend Hal Tucker and his girlfriend Sarah from the top of a mountain. Hal and Sarah got stranded in the Colorado Rockies after Hal suffered a knee injury at the peak. Now, as they begin the rescue operation, Hal manages to climb over to the other side, but when it gets to Sarah's turn, her harness begins to break. Immediately, Gabe climbs over to help her and manages to grab her hand. However, Sarah's glove slips out of his hands, and she falls to her death. Overcome with guilt, Gabe decides to quit the rescue operation and, possibly, his career as a ranger. 8 months later, at the U.S. Treasury in Denver, Richard Travers, a Treasury agent, prepares to secure the delivery of a total of $100 million in 3 briefcases to another location via flight. However, he is to be accompanied by an FBI agent named Matheson. At the same time, Gabe returns to the Ranger Lodge to gather his remaining items and also tries to persuade Jessie to leave with him, but she refuses. Shortly after, she leaves Gabe at the lodge and drives to the station to be with Hal and Frank. Now, while transporting the money on a DC-9 airplane, FBI agent Matheson notices a Lockheed Jetstar airplane trailing them and immediately brings it to Travers' attention. However, Travers doesn't seem concerned. With this, Agent Matheson decides to take action and quickly pulls his gun on Travers, revealing to the other agents that Travers is attempting to hijack the plane. Unfortunately, the other Treasury agents don't believe this and they quickly seize Matheson. In a twist of events, Travers shoots all of them, and one of the pilots, who happens to be working for Travers, also shoots his co-pilot in the head. Shortly after, Travers disengages the DC-9's tail cone and sends a cable to the Lockheed Jetstar to make a mid-air transfer. Travers subsequently activates a 5-minute countdown bomb and uses the cable to drop down to the other plane, leaving his pilot friend to bring the briefcases with him. However, as soon as the pilot attempts to drop the briefcase, wounded Matheson manages to shoot him down. Afterward, Matheson begins shooting at the hijackers and he manages to kill one of them and also damage the plane's hydraulic system. Shortly after that, the DC-9 explodes and the briefcases are left hanging mid-air. The hijackers try to pull the briefcases to their plane, but the cable snaps and they lose track of it. Now, with the condition of their plane, the pilot, Crystal, decides to make a rough emergency landing on a snowy mountain. After landing, Crystal realizes that her co-pilot is dead and then decides to make a distress call for help, claiming that there are 5 climbers who got stranded. Hal receives this distress call and asks them to stay calm. With this, Jessie decides to persuade Gabe to help with the rescue operation, but he refuses and leaves. Meanwhile, as Hal goes up the mountain to locate the climbers, he meets Gabe waiting for him. However, Hal is still bitter towards Gabe over Sarah's death and even threatens to push him off the cliff, but he later lets go. Shortly after, they find the supposed climbers, and they soon discover that the distress call was fake, as the thieves, led by a psychopathic former military intelligence operative, Eric Quaylen, take them hostage. Then, Eric reveals to them that they are trying to track the location of 3 briefcases with a tracking device, stating that they need their climbing expertise and knowledge of the area to do that. At gunpoint, Hal and Gabe lead the thieves to the first briefcase, and they find it located on a steep rock side. So, Eric asks Gabe to go get the briefcase, but first instructs Hal to tie a rope to his leg, and Travers suggests they also seize his jacket for insurance. All these while, Jessie tries to communicate with the duo, but Eric already seized their radio. Gabe finally gets to the briefcase and realizes it's filled with stolen money. However, Eric instructs his men to kill Gabe once he gets down with the briefcase, but Hal quickly warns him not to come down. Immediately, Delmar, one of the thieves, holds Hal at gunpoint, and Eric orders his other men, Kenneth and Heldon, to pull Gabe down. However, Gabe manages to sever the rope and the thieves begin to shoot at him, causing an avalanche. With this, Gabe discards the briefcase, and it eventually kills Heldon. After seeing the money fluttering away, Eric is made to believe that Gabe is now dead. However, Jessie continues sending radio messages to them, prompting Eric to coerce Hal into telling her that everything is fine. Nevertheless, Jessie still senses that something is wrong, and she begs Frank to fly her to the West Valley. Meanwhile, Gabe manages to climb up the mountain and later finds Jessie in an abandoned cabin. Gabe, who is now very cold, explains the situation of things to Jessie, suggesting that they need to reach the second briefcase before Eric in order to save Hal's life. By nightfall, Gabe and Jessie finally locate the second case, and they take all the money. Shortly afterward, Eric and his gang arrive to find an emptied case with only one note remaining, bearing a taunting message on it, saying, "Want to trade?" With this, they realize that Gabe is still alive, and Eric orders his men to split up and find him. Shortly after, Ryan, one of the thieves wearing a night vision Google, spots Gabe and Jessie and begins to shoot at them as they run away. However, Gabe manages to hide behind a rock and later uses a flare to blind Ryan before tackling him down a snowy slope. As they both begin to fall, Gabe presses Ryan's face against the ground before sending him off the cliff, as he manages to save himself with a pickaxe. After watching the death of Ryan and the supposed death of Gabe, Eric and his gang decide to take shelter in the abandoned cabin while Gabe and Jessie sleep close to a rock as they burn the money to keep themselves warm. The next day, as Hal leads the thieves to the last case, they come across two friends, Evan and Brett. Evan and Brett begin to tell Hal about their hikes from afar. However, Hal begins to plead with Eric to let them go, stating that they are just kids. Despite Hal's plea, Eric orders him to walk over to the boys, and as soon as he does, Eric instructs his men to open fire. Hal warns the boys to run away, but Travers knocks him to the ground. As the boys try to run away, Canetta opens fire on them, and Brett gets hit in the back, dying instantly. However, Canette and Travers decide to give wounded Evan a chase, but he manages to run off the mountain and parachute to safety. Meanwhile, after many failed attempts to reach Jessie, Frank decides to scout the mountain with a helicopter to look for her. However, he soon spots Evan's parachute hanging from the top of a tree and goes to rescue him. Soon, FBI agents began to scout the area after receiving reports of a crashed aircraft with a dead pilot. Now, in an attempt to reach the third case first, Gabe and Jessie decide to go through a cavern. Gabe first climbs to the top of the cavern to plant a rope for Jessie to climb. However, Canette, who has been tasked by Eric to find Gabe, hears his voice coming from below him and decides to hide. When Gabe shows up, Canette points his gun at him, asking where he kept the money. Gabe uses the hook to disarm Canette, quickly falling back into the cave. Canette goes after him and gets attacked by Jessie, but he quickly overpowers her, and Gabe joins in. During the fight, Canette manages to beat Gabe up, and as he pulls out his knife to stab him, Gabe hits him in the groin before slamming his back into a stalactite. After that, Gabe attempts to call for help using Canette's radio, but finds it stuck in a hole. Meanwhile, Eric plants a bomb on top of the cavern to kill Gabe and Jessie, and climbs a bridge to cross to the other side of the mountain. However, Hal manages to steal his radio to warn Gabe about the bomb rigged above them. With this information, Gabe and Jessie manage to escape the explosion using a rope as they seek shelter from the falling debris. Shortly after, the thieves decide to lure Frank to land the helicopter. So, Crystal pretends to be wounded, holding a flare to draw Frank's attention. Seeing this, Frank lands the helicopter, but by the time he realizes it's a trap, it is too late, and he is fatally shot by Delmar. Hal rushes over to Frank's dying body and secretly grabs his knife as he mourns his death. Later, Gabe and Jessie also get on the bridge to get to the other side of the mountain, but Gabe soon realizes it has also been rigged with a bomb, and he quickly alerts Jessie as they both run back for their life. Meanwhile, Travers suggests that they use the helicopter to go down and look for the third case, but Crystal reveals to them that the helicopter does not have enough fuel to go on such a journey. Then, Eric instructs Travers to hand over the tracker to him, but he soon realizes that Travers has set a custom password for it, making himself indispensable to the team. Travers points his gun at Eric, but Eric pulls Crystal to himself and shoots her dead, claiming to be the only pilot that can take them down the mountain. With this, Eric hands the trackers back to Travers and orders them to look for the money, stating that he'll be waiting for them. Meanwhile, Gabe decides to continue looking for the money alone, so he asks Jessie to head back to the station to seek help. Shortly after that, Gabe finds the money and quickly puts it in his bag. After a while, Travers realizes that they are now close to the signal, and he informs Delmar about it, instructing him to kill Hal quietly while he searches for the money. Delmar beats Hal so badly and decides to give him a final kick that will send him flying off the cliff, but Hal manages to hand on to the edge of the cliff. At this point, Hal uses the knife to stab Delmar in the leg and manages to kill him with his own gun. Meanwhile, Travers soon gets frustrated as the tracker begins to show him multiple locations. However, he soon realizes that he's been tricked again as he spots a rabbit wearing the tracking device, and he begins to shoot. Afterward, he sends a radio message to Eric, telling him that the Rangers beat them to the money. However, the FBI agents scouting the area soon pick up the signal, and they immediately recognize Travers' voice. Shortly after this, Travers spots Gabe running away and begins to take shots at him, but Gabe manages to escape. Meanwhile, Jesse sees their ranged helicopter and begins to wave it down, thinking that Frank is the one piloting it. However, she soon realizes it's Eric, and he takes her hostage. At the same time, Travers continues to trail Gabe and soon comes across a small bridge over a frozen river. But as soon as he steps on it, he gets pulled down by Gabe, who disappears into the water. Gabe later reappears on the surface of the frozen river and Travers tries to shoot him, but Gabe quickly uses his bolt gun to shoot Travers into the water, and his lifeless body is carried away by the current. Immediately after that, Hal rushes over and manages to pull Gabe out of the water. A few minutes later, Eric calls out to Travers over the radio, but Hal tells him that Travers is now swimming to Arizona. However, Eric informs them that he is holding Jesse captive on board the helicopter and demands that they surrender all the money to him, instructing them to meet him at the highest point of their location for the exchange. They finally meet at Peak as agreed, and Gabe asks Eric to let Jesse go first, and he agrees. Now, as soon as she gets away to a safe distance, Gabe asks Eric to move the helicopter close to the edge, making it look like he's planning to throw the money inside the helicopter. However, as soon as Eric gets close enough, Gabe slams the bag of money against the helicopter's rotors, causing it to shred the money, and he quickly tethers the helicopter to a steel ladder at the edge of the cliff. At this point, Eric gets angry and attempts to use the helicopter blade to kill Gabe, but he quickly jumps off the cliff and manages to grab the ladder. Luckily, Hal arrives in time and he shoots down the helicopter. However, the ladder snaps, leaving Gabe and Eric hanging on the wreckage of the helicopter, which is suspended by the cable. Soon, Gabe and Eric begin to fight, and Gabe manages to climb to safety as the wreckage snaps off the cable and falls to the bottom of the mountain, killing Eric. Finally, Gabe reunites with Jesse and Hal, as they are soon found by the agents, led by Walter Wright in a helicopter. Walter then promises to send a rescue helicopter to them, and the movie ends here. If you'd like to see us recap any other movies or topics you have in mind, just drop a comment and let us know. And don't forget to hit the like button, share this recap, and subscribe to stay updated for the next one. Until next time.